Hello, my name is Lisa, and I was once a co host of the Prince and the Pervert podcast. Thank you so much for your time today. Welcome to my new show, The Survivor Files, where we explore stories of strength, survival, and the truths that powerful people want buried. And while I'm not an expert in many things, I do know the Epstein case, and I hope to bring you information you've not heard before. Today, I'm talking about Nobody's Girl, the devastating new memoir by Epstein whistleblower Virginia Giuffre. This book will leave you speechless, not because of its big names, but because of Virginia's clear-eyed courage in telling the unbearable. The Epstein whistleblower's devastating memoir will literally take your breath away with its clear-headed recounting of the many, many abuses she endured during her short life. Sadly, Virginia will never see the public response to her memoir because she unalived herself in April this year at age 41. She has left behind a tale of devastation, and it emphasises how we, as a community, all let Virginia down and other children exactly like her. As someone who knew her briefly, I just hope her 3 kids can one day read this remarkable book. Their mum truly loved them, and she was driven to protect all children from her terrible fate. Virginia, I'm so proud of you, mate. I just wish you were here to see the reception to your book. Now, please note, this review includes material of a very sensitive nature. I've also had to change some of the terms because YouTube prefers creators to not use graphic descriptions. And so starts a story that will hit you in the middle of the chest, a book that made my whole world stop yesterday, even in the daylight. But it's important to remember Virginia urges us to keep reading her memoir so she can get the record straight. It can be a distressing read, but it's worth it. It's the least we owe her because her recollections and her lived experiences, they matter. Because what struck me the most about Virginia wasn't anger, it was her clarity and her eyes full of determination. Over time, she was navigating a minefield, the lawsuits, the NDAs, and the online harassment that would break most people. But even when she was under attack, she didn't hide. That's the Virginia I knew, fearless, intelligent, and honest. She wasn't perfect, none of us are, but she changed the landscape of accountability for the rich and the powerful. This mum of 3 made the world listen before it was too late. This is part 1 of the girls that nobody cared about. And we're going to start with Virginia's childhood. She has a quote at the start that says, "I know about monsters. As a child, I suffered nearly every kind of abuse, neglect, violence, the M word, and the R word." Here's a quote from Virginia to start. "I know about monsters. As a child, I suffered nearly every kind of abuse, neglect, violence, the M word, and the R word. As a teen, I was trafficked by one abuser before I ever met Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell, but those 2 doubled down on my suffering." She was born Virginia Louise Roberts in Sacramento, California on August 9, 1983, to Sky William Roberts and Lynn Trude Cable. She had an elder half-brother, Daniel Scott Wilson, from her mother's previous marriage, and a younger brother, Sky Rocket Roberts. The family relocated to Florida when she was 4 years old. Virginia came from what would be known today as an extremely troubled home, because in my opinion, her parents should not have been left in charge of a house plant, let alone 3 kids. Virginia alleges she was abused by her father and a family friend from the age of 7, a claim Sky Roberts Sr. denies. And in a statement in the memoir, he said, quote, "He never knew what was going on with Epstein until he saw the news online." Giuffre's brother, Sky Roberts Jr., told NBC News that he confronted his father over the abuse allegation. Quote, I said, "We know," he recalled. I mean, you were dad. You, the A word, your daughter. It's absolutely heinous what he did. In Nobody's Girl, Virginia reflects on the consequences of this alleged abuse. She writes, "Had my family's shameful secrets marked me for tragedy, or is there something going on in our culture that contributed to my bad situation? There has always been evil in the world, but human trafficking, the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labour or commercial sex act is particularly venal, especially when the victims are minors." She also suggested that her father might have taken money from Jeffrey Epstein after the billionaire began abusing her. Her brother recalled that the older man would, quote, buy decently nice things at points in their life, including a boat. All of this created a flow of cascading consequences for the young Virginia. She writes, "At 10 years old, I saw my pre-adolescent body as an enemy. I couldn't control how it drew the attention of the men who caused me pain, so I began to starve it. 'You don't deserve to eat,' said a voice in my head, and the only thing I allowed myself to devour in those days was a videotape of Disney's Cinderella." Barely a teen, she screamed the truth about her dad at several of her relatives while they were on a family holiday. This is what she said, quote, "This guy has been effing me for years, since I was a little kid," I yelled in their direction, "and no one's done shiz about it." Quote, "I wish I could say that they all stood up then to perform a protective barrier around me, but they didn't move. So after a startled silence, Dad grabbed me by the neck with one hand and hit me in the face." He denies this. The father also allegedly, quote, shared her with a family friend who'd lost custody of his own daughter as a consequence of his abuses. But years later, this other man, Forrest, I call him Forrest Dump, had some kind of a spiritual conversion and was now a religious figure. Of course he was. Quote, "What happened next would be funny if it wasn't so appalling. Forrest stood up and grabbed me by my shoulders and then pushed me to my knees, where he'd forced me to be so many times before. This time, though, he was clothed." Quote, he allegedly said, "You need to ask God for forgiveness for what you did to your dad and me." What kind of brutal entitlement makes a human behave like this? That's my comment, not Virginia's. She continues, quote, "Suddenly I knew what hate tasted like. It was bile in my mouth, bitter, and I had an appetite for it. I hated Forrest Dump. I hated my parents. I hated every living being." The only person who never let Virginia down was herself. Smart beyond her years, she once shaved her head to avoid gangs at a California school she was attending. Quote, "When I emerged with my buzz cut, my aunt was horrified, but my plan worked. The next day at school, I looked so crazy that even the gang steered clear." Her instinct to survive was indeed very strong. Quote, "For so many years, I had been sexualized against my will and had survived by acquiescing. Even as a girl on the precipice of womanhood, I was a pleaser, even when pleasing others cost me dearly." Virginia's early life was the succession of abuse, neglect, foster homes, rehab, and camps for wayward youth. We're actually going to do a whole episode on the camp for wayward youth. She lived on the streets at age 11, and 14, where she says she only found, quote, "more hunger and pain and more abuse." She continues, "How did I end up in Miami? Penniless, battered, and alone at the age of 15. There are so many answers to that question, but if you'd asked me in 1998, unpacking them all would have hurt way too much." As we know, Virginia had it so hard from a very young age. No one put their hand up to help her when she was a kid. Then she continued to survive in a system that chewed up young girls and spat them out. She very nearly became a crime statistic. While running away from home at age 15, she was almost murdered by a stranger driving a white van. Don't they always drive white vans? I think there's a lesson there. Quote, I need to make one quick stop, he said. He owed someone money, he said, and needed to pay them back. That's cool, I replied, in a voice I hoped sounded tough. The van turned west, away from the water, then parked in front of a seedy-looking motel. Come upstairs with me, the construction worker said. It'll only take a sec. I followed him up, then through a door into a dingy, worn-out room. He was on me immediately, and I knew right away I had underestimated his strength. He overpowered me and held me down on the bed, one hand around my neck. He then pulled and put its muzzle into my mouth. He smothered me until I lost consciousness. Then he let me breathe, then smothered me once again. I imagined myself dead, dumped in a ditch. And then a miracle. The man's cell phone rang, and he released me so I could answer it. Stay here, my attacker said. And so brave Virginia ran for her life into Miami and into the perverted arms of another sex trafficker. I suspected he was going to kill me either way, so I waited until I couldn't hear his voice anymore. Then I ran. That's how I became this tear-stained girl sitting on a curb in an empty beach parking lot. It is dusk when I see the limousine slowly pull up to a stop in front of me. The tinted rear passenger window hums as it opens, revealing the pasty face of a stranger in his 60s. He is heavy-set balding. I watch his eyes as they roam over my swollen, bruised face and battered body. Quote, oh, you poor baby, the old man says. His concern sounds genuine. Peering into the car, I see a pretty girl in a short red dress sitting next to him. She smiles at me. The old man wears black slacks and a collared shirt. The men in my family tend towards blue jeans and coveralls. I hope this stranger is different from them in other ways too. Quote, come in here so we can take care of you, the old man says, as the girl nods encouragement. I think of my attacker driving around in his white van, his weapon on his lap, searching for the girl who got away. I stand up, wobbly. The limo door opens and the old man slides over to make room for me. His name is Ron Eppinger, and he runs a modelling agency. Don't they always? Be careful if you get pulled over for modelling. Called Perfect 10. He gestures towards Jana, the girl next to him, who is from the Czech Republic. Would I like to become a model like her? He asks me how old I am, and at first I say 16 because it sounds better to me, less vulnerable. Eppinger shakes his head. He isn't buying it. So I tell him the truth, that I'm 15, which seems to please him. Quote, as long as you never lie to me again, I will take you in, he says. What does that mean, I think, but don't ask out loud. Then Eppinger's fleshy face turns sad. He had a daughter once, he said. That's when he reaches for me and strokes my hair. If you want, I can be your new daddy. Oh my God, that is so disgusting. How quickly he does that, twisting the father-daughter bond into something sickening. But I already know that trick, and I want to believe it doesn't work on me anymore. I don't trust parents, especially fathers. She lived with Eppinger, who is now dead, for approximately 6 months until he was raided by the FBI. In Miami, he was running a front business for an international sex trafficking operation known as his modelling agency. He later pleaded guilty to charges of alien smuggling for ladies of the night, interstate travel for ladies of the night, and money laundering. The question we often hear, though, about survivors is why do they go with these kind of guys? And why did Virginia keep going back? Well, as I've said, she was abused from the age of 7. At 12, she was smoking something and skipping school. At 13, she was in and out of foster homes. And at 14, she was on the street. So she was trafficked twice as a teenager by Ron and then by Epstein and Maxwell. So by the time she got to Palm Beach, she was desperately trying to get a life on track, but she had just had a lifetime of terrible experiences. But the thing about Virginia is she's not scared of anyone. And she says, so many young women, myself included, have been criticised for returning to Epstein's lair, even after we knew he wanted to abuse us. How can you complain about being abused? Some of us, who are these people? When you could so easily have stayed away. If you didn't like feeling dirty, you could simply have never gone back. But that stance wrongly discounts what has for many of us have been through before we encountered Epstein, as well as how good he was at spotting girls whose wounds made them vulnerable to him. Several of us had been abused as children. Many of us were poor or even homeless. Before meeting Epstein, one of his victims had watched her father attack a boy to death. Another was present when her boyfriend unalived himself. We were girls no one cared about, and Epstein pretended to care. At times, I think he even believed he cared. A master manipulator who excelled at divining the desires of others. He threw what looked like a lifeline to girls who were drowning. So, thank you so much for joining me today. That is the end of part 1, the first episode. I will be back very, very soon, and we will be going through Virginia's book, and then we will go through a book by one of the other survivors, and following that we'll go through the memoir that Virginia did many years ago that was actually put into court papers. So, and then after that, let me know what else you want. I can talk Epstein until the cows come home. So if you want me to comment on news after this, I can do that. Or if you want me to keep going with these books, there's so many Epstein books. And you know what? I have one of the few copies of Ghislaine Maxwell's mother's book. I can read parts of that for you too. So here we are on YouTube. Make sure that you follow, like, feed that hungry algorithm, and also comment about what you want in the notes down there. But I thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And I will be getting back to you very, very soon. Thanks. Bye.